Hello and welcome to Tonight at 8 from the RSGB. Contesting or radio sport is a particularly competitive aspect of our hobby which doesn't always appeal to everyone. But as we'll find out tonight, there's so much more to it than just scoring points, and our presenter will show that even non-contesters can benefit from some of the ideas and activities which radio sport produces. Joining us now is Mark Haynes, M0DXR, himself a keen contester and England holder of many CQ and IOTA contest records. Welcome to Tonight at 8, Mark. Can you give us a flavour of what you'll be covering this evening?
Thank you very much, David, and a very good evening to you and all of the watchers, whether you're live, watching this live or not. I'm really excited about this evening, and it's a real pleasure to be representing the aspect of contesting with the RSGBs Tonight at 8. We'll be covering a number of aspects this evening, but I'm sure that you will have some questions, which feel free to raise those, and I'll try and address some at the end. Not sure we'll get through all of them, but we'll do our very best to answer your question. But we'll be covering a number of aspects that makes this particular facet of amateur radio really exciting and interesting.
Thank you, Mark. And as you say, a reminder that if you're watching this on Monday, the 9th of May, then this is live and you can ask questions and make comments on either BATC or YouTube chat at any time during the presentation or straight afterwards. Please include your first name and call sign if you have one within every message. And note that you can make this video stream fill your screen on most devices, usually by double clicking on the picture or pressing the full screen button. But now back to Mark to find out more about radio sport.
Thank you very much. And once again, good evening. And I'm really excited, as I've already said, to be presenting this. Contesting is an aspect of our wonderful hobby that I've been into for about 25 years now. It's the thing that really excites me. It's the one aspect of this hobby that I find particularly really interesting, and I learn so much every time I take part in a contest. It's not for everybody, certainly, and there are lots of different views, of course, as there are with many aspects of our hobby, and it's the same with most hobbies, isn't it, really, I suppose. But I'd like to share some of my experience and also touch on some of the various topics that can make contesting so rewarding and really educational, actually. As I said, I've been contesting for 25 years. I was first 12 years of age when I entered my first contest on 70 centimeters, an FM only contest. And I was, even just by making 10 or 12 contacts, I was really excited by this aspect. To think that you could have a competitive aspect and have radio come together was just so much fun. So we'll look at also pushing the boundaries, so a little bit more on the advanced side as we get a bit later through the presentation as well, so we can see how this can really be stretched to the limits of human capability. So a little bit of an introduction then. So contesting, we'll look at what is a contest, the history of contesting, because it's been going on for quite some time now. And we'll look at some of the present day basics of contesting. We'll touch on the skills and knowledge, station efficiency and improvement, fun and friendships that develop as a result of this aspect of amateur radio, and the various awards and recognition that you can strive for. We'll talk about getting started in this aspect of the hobby as well. So, what is a contest? Well, a contest really, the definition is to make as many contact as many stations as you can within a certain time period and exchange certain information. That's really the overall objective. It allows you to test and improve operator proficiency, station performance, and understanding the band conditions and propagation. Very important aspects. And of course, that's not always the same. We know as radio amateurs that from one day to the next, and even 1 hour to the next, or even 1 minute to the next, the band conditions can vary significantly. So it's a very important aspect of understanding what's happening with propagation. Emergency communications, field days, these are all, again, aspects of contesting. It's been now an aspect of amateur radio for 100 years. So the very first transatlantic tests on HF were said to be the very first contests. Some images here of some very early contesting days. Looks like a field day on the top left there. Very different to what we see these days, but still the overall objective was the same. Now, present day contesting, there are so many contests to choose from, and some of them you would not even know are taking place because they're perhaps very small and a very small number of entrants. The other large contests like CQ Worldwide, ARRL, CQWPX, these are all big events that if you were to turn your radio on and tune across the bands, it's very crowded and there's so much activity. This can be frustrating. This can be frustrating for many operators that are not contesters, that choose not to participate. But on the positive side, it brings so much activity to our bands and gives us the opportunity to make contacts that perhaps we wouldn't normally be able to. Contacting countries, you tend to get very large stations that come on the air and they're around. So it gives a good opportunity to work some new countries or IOTAs perhaps. But there are many national societies around the world that run their own contests, like the RSGB, like ARRL, etc. The contests are across the entire spectrum. So HF from 160 to 10 meters, except the walk bands, of course. These are contest-free bands on 30, 17, and 12 meters. Many also take place on VHF, UHF, which for a lot of the time otherwise would be very quiet bands. These contests vary in length from 30 minutes to about 48 hours. The larger contests, 48 hours, which is a very long time. And so some single operators are able to keep going for that length of time if they prepare correctly. Others may choose to do categories that are much shorter, but still within the same 48-hour event. Typically, contests run over the weekend. There are some weekday contests too, and in fact, there is one this evening, which is interesting timing, you might think, for this presentation. But in fact, it may be quite a positive because this maybe would target individuals that are not doing the contest. So there is an RSGB CC contest. So that's just an example. There are VHF contests that take place during the week as well, usually on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Across all the modes, CW, SSB, data modes, even FM now these days with the United Kingdom activity contest that the RSGB have introduced, there are FM contests there. These events can be worldwide or perhaps over a specific continent, area, or even a country only. So there's a lot to choose from. A little bit about what a contest is not. A contest isn't really the place to get an accurate signal report. And this is a topic of much debate over the years. If everyone's 5 and 9, then why do we need to send a signal report? That's a good question, I guess. You tend to get more accurate signal reports on the VHF and UHF contests, but on HF, everyone tends to be 5 and 9. And you think, well, what's the point? Well, a good late friend, only recently, silent key, very sad to say, Roger G3SXW, he educated me on this and said, well, the signal report may always be 5 and 9, but it gives the QSO structure. It allows the operator to understand or be ready for the information that follows, whether it be a CQ zone or a serial number or a locator square. So it's a good way of giving the QSO structure. So for that reason alone, it's worth doing. It's not a suitable event for exchanging information irrelevant to the contest. So things like name, QTH, weather, equipment, that they are not really relevant to the contest because it's all about making as many contacts as you can in that time. And it is not a time for using that dodgy amplifier or broadband transmitter because in fact, a lot of the adjudication panels, the committees will actually be using SDR receivers and recording the contest. And anybody with dirty signals or such like would actually be facing potential disqualification, certainly in some of the larger contests like CQ Worldwide. Okay, so let's look at some of the contest basics. So as it says here, each contact scores a number of points, and those points will vary depending on the event and who you're speaking to. So it varies on location, call sign, country, and perhaps prefix, certainly for contests like the work tool prefix contest. Some contests have multipliers too. So this is where you would multiply your QSO points with the number of multipliers. So you may have a contest where it has a country multiplier. So you add all your countries up and multiply your points by that number. So every new country counts for so many more points overall. The multiplier could be a district, a prefix, a zone, even your age. There are some of the, I think it's the Work Tool Asia contest, the All Asia DX, where the exchange is your age. Contests may be single band or multi-band, depending on perhaps, as we touched on, how long you want to operate or how efficient your station is on particular frequency bands. It can also be single mode or multi-mode. And each contest usually has several sections. So that would be to suit operator preferences or to allow a wide range of stations to be competitive. So if you're running a long wire antenna or a dipole or a vertical antenna, you may think, well, I'm never really going to be competitive against, my friend down the street who's running a big Yagi antenna with an amplifier. Well, that's why there's different sections. So you can actually be competitive regardless of your station if you're very selective about the category. There are a lot of contests to choose from. Some, as I've said, 30 to 90 minutes on some of the domestic UK RSGB contests. But then you could have some of the worldwide contests where you'd have something up to around 40,000 entrants. And that's a huge number of participants there on the 48-hour ones. There will definitely be something to interest you. If you're interested in this aspect of contesting, there is bound to be something out there for you. And as I've already touched on, there will most certainly be something suited to the abilities of you as an operator and your station. And so the variety is definitely there. So after the contest, the log will need to be submitted for adjudication purposes. So this is usually done by robots, computer robots, but there are some very intelligent code that's been written in these robots that flag up anomalies and targets the adjudication team to specifics. So I'm on the CQ contest committee, for instance, and one of my duties is to look at all the logs that are coming in, and there'll be red flags against certain entries for various different things. And it could be that a contest call sign was used, but actually the individual's call sign was put as the entry call. So it would flag up that you've maybe made 2,000 QSOs, but you don't actually appear in anybody's log. So that's one that would stand out. But accuracy is really the aspect where the robot comes in. It's able to cross-check your log with other logs, and it will identify inaccurate information. The results are generally published online and in the major magazines, and the receivers of certificates and plaques will be the highest scoring entrants. But actually, the certificates are awarded to everybody now, I believe, for certainly the CQ contest, and I believe the RSGB contest as well. It just states your position on the certificate. So it's a good way to obtain some very decorative paper for your shack. But of course, as the last point there, the biggest prize is your call sign in the results table, and that's really always very exciting and nice to see. So why contest? Well, there are a number of things that come to mind here. Number one, improving operator abilities. So I'd like to think that after 25 years of contesting, my ability to listen and be very aware about what the band's doing and being accurate on the information that comes in has been developed over that time. testing the abilities of your station, understanding the strengths, the weaknesses, things that you may want to change in order to deal with things like QRM or such like. CW, SSB, and data mode skills, they all come into it. Making the best use of time. So actually thinking very carefully about every second that passes and what you could do to maximize your score. These are all things that have developed significantly over the past, I would say, 50 years or so. Accuracy, of course, is paramount, and mistakes will cost you points. Strategy, when to run, to call CQ, when to run, when to search and pounce, when to QSY, when to change bands, when to sleep. Not forgetting that very important human function. Pile-up management. Being able to pick out call signs first time. If you have 10 callers, focusing on one of them getting full call signs rather than partials. These are all things which take a lot of practice. Living with QRM. Understanding whether you need to get a better radio or perhaps buy a filter or purchase your BHI noise eliminating speaker. All these kind of things. Understanding propagation, very important, and knowing where to be, which way to be, which area to be looking for, at what time of day, on what frequency, but also being reactive to what you've already worked. So if you're doing a 48-hour contest and you think, well, on the first day, I only worked 100 Americans, so I really need to pay attention to the US on day 2. And then single operated 2 radio, known as SO2R. We'll touch on that a little bit later in the presentation, but this is a technique to really maximize your score. Operating technique then, because this is very, very critical. It's very important. So only say what you need to say. These are things, remembering, of course, that this aspect of amateur radio is less about exchanging information about your name, QTH, you know, what you've been up to, your station, that kind of thing. The contest is really about exchanging only the critical information. So only say what you need to say. So when you reply to a call of somebody calling you, you say their call sign, and ideally without phonetics, because they know what their call sign is. If you're confident in what you've heard, then by all means come back without phonetics. Speak very clearly on SSB. You know, try to put yourself on the other side of the fence, on the receiving side, on how you would like to hear somebody come back to you. CW macros and voice keyers, automated functions that really help. You know, after 20 hours of operating sideband, maybe getting a bit of a weak voice, so voice keyers may be good. But of course, CW macros also would reduce the strain on your hand on the CW key, and also potentially reduce error rates as well. Practice multitasking. Practice speaking and typing at the same time. Different things. So you're typing the call sign of the guy that's called you and saying it perhaps at a different time that you're typing. Turning the beam while you're calling CQ and or working somebody, doing things like that. Make good band selection decisions, as we've already said, that it's very important to be in the right place. If there's a big opening to JA on 20 meters and you're working sporadically into Europe on 10 meters, that may not be the most effective place. So keep an eye on propagation and frequency selection, as with frequency selection in terms of if you're on a crowded band, being aware of not being too close to the really big signals, or there may be a very loud station that is out of your skip range, you're inside the skip zone. So you can hear somebody there that's very weak, but actually in the US, they'd be very loud. So it's having that awareness of where to be CQing. So a little bit about hourly rates. This is just to give a flavor of these are the top hours of the CQ Worldwide contest, and all this information is available on cqww.com. But these guys are the best here, right? So on SSB, we've got W2SC, who tends to go down to Barbados for his CQ Worldwide operations. You can see there that he's got 407 QSOs in an hour. I mean, that is really incredible. But what I suppose is perhaps even more amazing is that on CW, my good friend Dan N6MJ, who operated at Costa Rica as TI7W, 450 QSOs in an hour is the all-time record. I mean, that's just an insane rate. And he achieves that by doing SO2R and even the more advanced technique called 2BSIQ, which we'll come on to shortly. This note on the right here is consider perhaps if you're able to qualify for one, an SCC, a contest call, which is issued by the RSGB and Ofcom. And they are 1x2 calls. So mine is G9W, for instance. This can be useful for reducing the on-air time and maximizing. It also is quite an attractive call sign for callers. So that's something that once you've got a few contests under your belt, you'll be able to qualify for. So Morse code skills progression. So perhaps starting at very slow speeds and working up, but it's also very much dependent on how many stations you're calling. So you may want to call CQ quite slowly on CW if you have no callers. But then as you have a pile up of 3 stations, perhaps you want to crank it up to 30 words a minute. Pile up of 10 stations, you can afford to take it up to 40 words per minute. And this is how the guys down in these DX locations achieve the big rates, because really, once you get good at CW, especially in CQ Worldwide, all you really need to listen for is that they're coming back to your call sign. And because the exchange information is a zone, you know the zone already. So that the logging program will tell you the zone, well, more or less, unless it's a US or Russian station where there's multiple zones. But generally speaking, these guys in Costa Rica, for instance, they're in zone 7, and that's always a constant. So you can afford to crank the speed up, and all the guys have to do is receive their call. So as it says there, the skill will come in when you're running 200 an hour while arguing with a teammate about band change strategy or whose turn it is to make the cup of tea. Living with QRM. So QRM can be really tough, especially in built-up areas or rain static or such like. But yeah, that can be a tough one, and especially with a crowded band, it can be very difficult to pull out those weaker stations. But that's something as a contester you learn to adapt to. Propagation, really important. So understanding the skip zone, where you're likely to be making QSOs, which way to point the beam. And it's always worth keeping an eye on the on the grey line, where the grey line is. You can see here at the bottom right. And it's interesting, isn't it, that on certain bands you can hear those VKs and ZLs coming in absolutely great, but it's perhaps really difficult to hear stations that are closer because they don't follow that grey line, and that's the enhanced path. So it can be very tough. But keeping an eye on this and thinking about, well, it's like it is right now. I'm looking outside and it's dusk. So it's a very good time perhaps for 40 and 80 meters to be working down into VK, ZL and those areas. So a bit more about why contest. So station improvements, understanding what antennas work best. For instance, the CC that's running tonight, you'd probably want to target domestic stations here in the UK. So you'd want to be thinking about using perhaps dipole antennas for that really high angle radiation. But if you're in a DX contest, perhaps you want to be looking at a vertical or maybe even a Yagi. Do you want resonant antennas, single band antennas, multi-band antennas? Of course, you need to think about how you optimize that. And don't forget feeders, baluns, ATUs, all really important aspects of the antenna system. And of course, you can always get a problem where you're operating and suddenly the SWR shoots sky high. You think, oh, why did that happen? It's happened to me many times. And sometimes it can be that you're running an amplifier and it's only when you run it for a certain period of time, balun gets hot and you realize actually the balun can't cope with the power. So you learn things from doing these longer events that perhaps you can't practice or be ready for. The shack ergonomics, so making it efficient, monitors at eye level, keyboards, 2 keyboards perhaps, 1 for each radio if you're doing single operator 2 radio. Having everything at easy access should it be needed, rotating at arm's reach. Minimizing the fatigue and minimizing off time. Of course, it's a contest, so you want to be on the air as much as possible. Yeah, you want a comfy environment, right? So a nice comfy chair, not too comfy, so you don't want to be falling asleep, but you need good light and a comfy chair. I tend to like the heat, which is a bit of a stray. I'm a bit strange, I think, a bit of a strange breed, but I like the heat. And my good friend Chris Danby, G0DWV, will, I'm sure, explain to you if you were to talk to him that he steps into the shack when I'm operating his station, and sometimes it can be like 40 degrees in there, and he doesn't really get it. But it's probably a good idea to keep it a constant, comfortable temperature to minimize the need to sleep and drift off. It's all about fun and friendship, really. It can be great for socializing in a team event and enjoying that time with fellow radio amateurs. The contest community is a great set of people, and we all have a load of fun. Pre and post contest planning and discussions. It's always really interesting to have a chat before the contest about your plans, have a chat after the contest. How did it work out? The station manager, the antenna king, the IT expert, the multiplier spotter, these are all skills which a team can offer and give you a maximum ability to do well. It's great to have that first-hand experience of different stations and ideas as well, of course. So even if you don't win a contest certificate, there are other awards to chase. Yeah, so there are plenty of things like work tool states, work tool zones, and doing a contest can really boost your journey towards that goal. It wouldn't be unusual in CQ Worldwide to work 100 countries. Even for small stations. So it's a great way to rack up those achievements. And there are some other awards like the PA Centenary Club, the Russian District Award, RDA. These are all things that contests can help with. So getting started, it's just pick an event. There are contest calendars available in radio magazines and on the internet. I'll show you a couple of those in the slides to come and where to find that. But think about whether you want to operate at home, a club station, go out portable, operate single op or with a group, perhaps a bit of both, CW, SSB, or data modes. There's really is something for everyone. So the well-known CQ Worldwide contests, they're an easy way to, as it says here, to make QSOs with a number of stations and a number of DXCCs. But they are very busy and very fast-paced, and some of the guys you listen to will be really quick. So you have to be on your toes. The suggestion is to pick a target of so many QSOs, perhaps for the beginners and those that are just breaking into the world of contesting. Maybe set a target of 100 QSOs, or how much time you have. And then perhaps aim to improve that each year or each time you enter a contest. Perhaps try a single band. It allows some sleep because, if you pick 10 meters, for instance, we're starting to see some 10-meter propagation now, which is great. I can, looking on the cluster and all these spots coming up. Perhaps, if you were to pick 10 meters, it gives you some time to sleep at night when the band closes, and the same opposite with 160. It's a nighttime band generally, so there are things you can do about making it a little bit more civilized. So everyone contests can be very, very frantic. A lot of the national contests, you can only work stations in that country. For instance, the Scandinavian activity contest, you can only work Scandinavia. So you couldn't come on and work another UK station, for instance. The French contest, REF, Poland DX, PACC, OKOM contest, ARRODX, ARI. There's a lot to choose from. For the European-based contests, generally small antennas will be enough. So for where contacts into Europe, it's only contacts to Europe, then perhaps simple antennas, 100 watts, you'll be competitive, and it will be a bit more of a relaxed pace, so a good entry contest. And 90-minute contest for the RSGB CCs, or low power field days, ROLO, which is the rotating locator contest, and some of the VHF, UHF, UKACs. They're a great way to get a flavour. Okay, so let's get on the air. Yeah, how about that? This is the station of K3LR in Pennsylvania, USA. There are quite a lot of USA stations like this. Well, maybe not quite this big. There are a handful, but there's some serious engineering at some of these stations, and I've been fortunate to have operated here 7 times in the CQ Worldwide contest, and it really is incredible. Here on the right, you see this is the largest 40-meter array in the world. So this is a 3-high stack of 4-element full-size Yagis on 40 meters, and there are a number of other Yagis on that tower as well for different bands. The left-hand picture is the 20-meter main run station. It's 4 6-element Yagis on 20 meters, all independently rotatable on those ring rotors. So it's a really competitive station. I believe there are in total about 13 towers at K3LR. Really incredible. This is another US station with a number of towers. Very impressive. This is the K3LR shack in the basement. There's 2 stations per band, from 80 through to 10, and then a single station on 160, all with ICOM 7851s and monoband amplifiers. You can see that great big geochron on the wall there for showing you the grey line and sunlight and nighttime. Then, of course, you have the more sort of field day style operations where clubs will go out and enjoy the weather, enjoy the radio, and get on the air. Yes, lots of big towers there in those pictures. But in the UK, many of the big contest stations are put up temporarily for like field days, islands on the air contests, CQ Worldwide. A club will go out or an individual will go out and erect a station for the contest. There are UK contesters with big towers and beam antennas, but they are way outnumbered by those with dipoles and verticals. And it doesn't make you really, not competitive, because if you're careful about the category selection, you can do very well. So let's look at picking an event. So on the left side here, this is a snapshot of the RSGB CC website, where you have a calendar of all the contests throughout the year. And it allows you to understand the uploaded entries for each contest that have already taken place, but also plan your contest activities. So this is just for RSGB contests. And then on the right-hand side here, this is all the contests in the whole world. This is a calendar. So that's at contestcalendar.com, and that's WA7BNM's contest calendar. And it's very useful. You can see there are so many contests, but some of these you wouldn't really even know were taking place, and the activity levels can be very low. But some of them will be very high. Like this past weekend, we had the ARI International DX contest that you can see about 2/3 of the way down there, May the 7th to May the 8th. And that was the Italian DX contest. So everyone works everybody, but the multipliers are the Italian districts. So I'd encourage looking at these websites and planning your contest activities, whether it would just be, maybe giving away some points perhaps, rather than a competitive entry. So logging, of course, we have to log our QSOs, and there are many software packages available. Some are free download, some for a small donation. But this one here is the one that I tend to use, and it is free. It's a free download, N1MM Plus, and this is an example of how it can be laid out. So, on the left-hand side there, you have your band map, which plots all the QSOs from the cluster or from those that you have spotted yourself onto a map. You have your call entry window down at the bottom there. That's where you enter the call signs. And you have your log at the top, a running log, the cluster in the middle. Now on the right-hand side, you've got information on QSO rate on the top right. So you can see over time and over QSOs what your QSO rate is. And then a summary of the contest down on the bottom right there with a breakdown by band and mode and score. So everything really is there that you need. And of course, super check partial. This one sort of just to the right of center at the top. As you enter call signs into the field when they call you, it gives you a breakdown of who it could be. So you enter a couple of characters of the call sign, like M0. You have all the M0s will appear that have been active in contests. And then M0D, you'll get maybe a dozen. M0DX, and there'll probably be a couple. And it just allows you to get ready for the call that's calling you. And maybe if there's QRM, you can down select which caller it is. So a very useful function. And that comes from a database contained within the login software. Now, I said that we'd come back to some more advanced techniques, and I want to talk a little bit about SO2R, single operator 2 radio. So this is where you have, you enter the single operator category, and the rule is you're only allowed one transmitted signal on any frequency at any one time. So what do? Well, you utilize the receive time to transmit somewhere else. And this is the Costa Rica station of TI7W. And this, if you remember the guy that I showed at the very top of the QSO rates, the hourly rates, TI7W operated by N6MJ, this is the station he used in Costa Rica. So, I mean, there's a lot going on there. There's two ICOM 7851s, very good radios, excellent for rejecting signals from one another. And you have two amplifiers, one feeding each radio. Big screen for the logger, which allows many windows to be distributed. And then, of course, you've got two CW keys on the right, one left radio, one right radio. All the band switching. Of course, there'll be band decoders here, which, on a QSY on any radio to any band will select the right antenna and the next available antenna if there's multiple antennas for one band. So it's a very busy station. There's a lot that can go wrong, but when you've got it organized like this, it's just incredible, and the efficiency can be equally incredible. Now, I mentioned 2BSIQ earlier. Now, 2BSIQ stands for two band synchronized interleaved QSOs. So what that means is that traditionally with one radio, you have this, over time, you would have this picture at the top here, the consecutive QSOs, where you go back to somebody, they come back to you, and it's just one after the other. You transmit, receive, transmit, receive. And then you go on to the next QSO, transmit, receive, transmit, receive. But if you now look at the bottom here, the interleaved QSOs, this is where you're transmitting on the first radio, but then when you go over to receive, K1AA calling you, you're then transmitting on the second radio. And then when you transmit on the first radio, you're receiving on the second radio. So you are minimizing your off-air time as much as possible. And it really improves the efficiency, because that's how you achieve a 480 hour. It's quite complicated at first, but if you can imagine that when you're listening to both radios on receive, you have the left radio in the left ear of your headphones, the right radio in the right ear of your headphones. As soon as you transmit on the left radio on CW, which is a pre-programmed CW message from your logging software, You don't need to listen to that CW, so you hear nothing out of your headphones. You automatically go into receive mode on the second radio through both ears, so you're able to hear callers on that second radio. And you're literally going from one to the other. It's a technique that's developed over the years, and those that are coming out and winning the single operator categories are incredibly efficient at this, and they're practicing all year round for CQ Worldwide, the biggest contest of the year. Now, if you can imagine on sideband, this is a lot more difficult on sideband. Why? Well, because you have to physically say the call sign of the guy calling you. There's no automation for that. Well, it is possible, but generally it's not really that efficient. So you need to come back to K1AA on the first radio and give him his report. Makes it very difficult to receive on the second radio when you're talking. But, you know, it is possible, I suppose, with developing your skill on that. But that's why the hourly rate on sideband is lower than CW, because that 2B SIQ technique is much less achievable or not as efficient in terms of QSO rate on sideband as it is on CW. This is a picture of 2B SIQ on the logger. So this is wind test logger. And you can see just by looking at the QSOs there that this guy is on 160 and 80 meters. So he's interleaving his QSOs. If you look at the band, the second column on the log, 160, 80, 160, 80, 160, 80, just going from one to the other. And each keyboard, once you start typing on the left keyboard, it would enter that band. Right keyboard, it would enter that band. So there's no confusion on the logger. So shack configuration, the ergonomics of the shack, of course, are very important to make sure everything's efficient. Antenna distribution, so planning, if you're fortunate to have more than one antenna, if you have a vertical or a dipole, sensibly placing them in your property or your garden to minimize the interference between them, and give you the best takeoff in the directions that you want to go. Having a band map with a waterfall is quite useful. So 10 meters is the classic, where you never know if 10 meters is going to be open, although hopefully we're on the upward trend now. But for years now, with 10 meters, you really have to keep an eye on, especially if you haven't made many QSOs there or you've got lots of multipliers to work. Regularly checking 10 meters. So by instantly going to 10 meters and having a band map to see if there are any signals there is very useful. Filtering, so reducing QRM, and perhaps between two stations where you don't want to be hearing the second station. Earthing, having sufficient earthing for your station. Logging program selection, as we've already seen some examples of that, and interfacing that with your radio. Automate as much as possible. Backups, so maybe even for the serious contest, having power backups, a UPS of some sort, so that if everything goes down, at least you have a bit of power to keep you going, or, you know, as a minimum, the PC. And perhaps you need to go down if you're running an amplifier, perhaps just running 100 watts if the power goes. Food and drink access, of course, you want to be minimizing your amount of time getting out of the chair and preparing and eating food, although I know contesters who have a microwave, a fridge, and, you know, all the facilities in their shack to hand. A little bit more difficult with a toilet, but I'm sure there may be some ideas there. Log submission, so electronic logs, make sure they're not corrupted. You can extract your log in the format needed for the entry from all the contest loggers, so that's quite straightforward. Make sure that they contain all the summary details. They're sent to the right email address for the entry, and they're submitted on time. You get a variety of different deadlines, whether they might be very short after the contest, within the next hour, I think some of them are, or perhaps you may get a week or so, or a maximum couple of weeks. But ask for assistance if you're unsure. There'll always be a committee representing the contest, so there'll always be a contact there. Always submit an entry if you can, even if you've just been dabbling or worked a few guys. It helps with the log checking. This is an example of a log entry notepad file. in the correct format. So it's just an extract from the logger. So log checking and adjudication. So it's quite a big job, actually, this, and can take a significant amount of manpower to do, especially on the big contests. So logs are sent into the adjudicator, and I've already mentioned the different deadlines. Sometimes the logs will need reformatting. There'll be lots of errors. Paper logs are still received, so that takes time to upload and check. Usually the software, the robots, as I mentioned earlier, will do the scoring, the duplicate checking, error checking, UBN reports. UBN stands for unique, busted, and not in log. And this is a report that many contest organizations will provide to the entrant once the results have been published. So this is where you get to see unique, so where you have worked a station that only appears in your log, nobody else's. Busted, where you've got the call sign wrong, or not in log, where you don't appear in their log at all. So you didn't win. You didn't win. That's fine. Only a small number of the total entrants will win their section or the contest overall. So that's okay. Analyze the results. Have a look. See where you were placed. Did you lose many points after the log checking? What was the reason for that? Learn from that. How does your score differ from the winners? Can you improve your strategy? Did you beam the wrong way? Did you spend too much time on a certain band? Did you spend too much time asleep? Can you improve your operator style in any way? Your CW skills, etc. Going further, so the World Radio Sport Team Championship. This is the Olympics of amateur radio contesting. So it takes place every 4 years. And this is where you have to qualify for WRTC, depending on your performance on contests over a certain period of time, usually a couple of years. So there's never really a complete level playing field, of course. You know, we're dealing with a black art to a large extent with radio. You know, stations, locations, propagation, they're all different depending on where you are. WRTC brings 50 teams together in the same relatively close geographical location. And you represent your country. There'll be two persons per team, around 50 teams, as I said. And they'll all come together every 4 years to see really who is the best. And that's a really exciting event. In 2014, it was in the United States. In 2018, it was in Germany. And the next one, which is in 2022, which actually will be taking place next year due to the restrictions, is in Italy. So next year, you'll hear lots of Italian call signs of the WRTC participants. But you won't know who they are. They'll all be obscure call signs, so you can't go on and just work the English stations or whatever your country is. That's all revealed at the end. So it's a very well organized program. Going further, contest expeditions. So maybe go somewhere, go on holiday and operate the contest. Take a vertical or a dipole. From some of these locations, you can do very well with simple equipment, especially if you're a rare country and a sought after multiplier. Sometimes residents of these countries, resident hams can make their stations available for use in a contest. So that can reduce the need to take equipment. But this aspect is really, as I say here, is really for the keen contester. So that's the end of what I wanted to say this evening. I hope that's been interesting and given a flavour for my take on contesting and why I find it interesting. And I hope you too have found that interesting. I would encourage everyone to get on the air, read up on contesting, maybe have a listen, give it a try, make QSOs. The propagation is getting better all the time now. So we're in for a treat. This is a great time to be getting into contesting. So I would strongly encourage that. And I really hope that I get to work you very soon. Thank you very much. And 73, I'll stand by for questions.
All right, Mark, thank you very much. And as you've just said, if you've got any questions for Mark, and you haven't already done so, please ask them now, or maybe give us comments about how you found contesting as well. You can either do that on YouTube chat or BATC messaging, and please don't forget to include your first name and your call sign if you have one within every message. So Mark, first I'm going to start with Peter M7PJL, who said, would satellites also play a part in contests, or is it more a challenge with terrestrial transmit and receives?
You know, that's a really interesting point. I think there are challenges and types of contests available, certainly award programs with satellite communications. Traditionally, contests would be terrestrial and not using satellites or repeaters and that type of relay communication. But it's not something I've actually dabbled in myself. Perhaps I should. But I would encourage you to take a look at the AMSAT, the Amateur Satellite website, for information on that. And I'm sure that they can offer you information on that aspect.
Thank you very much, Mark. Sorry, I'm just looking at some of the questions and comments that are coming in now, which is great. So please don't hesitate to send us a comment or question now. Terence 2E0IPK said, it's okay saying keep an eye on propagation? 3 times I've heard that so far, he said. But if 17, 15, 12 and 10 metres are not good, but 20 and 40 metres are, why do contesters have the full band and nothing for general calls?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, Terence. Thanks for the question. Yeah, we've seen, haven't we, quite a lot. 10, 15 meters have been very, very poor on recent years with the solar cycle, and of course that will sort of, operators will have a tendency to then cluster on 20 meters, and the band will be very, very crowded. Yes, it's you tend to find it with the really large contests like the CQ Worldwides, the WPXs, the ARRLs. The band is just absolutely full, and that can make it very difficult for non-contest operators. So I absolutely appreciate that. I think it's a tough one, and I suppose with 17 meters and 30 meters being walk bands, and that is probably if there really are QSOs that want to happen outside the contest, I would encourage the use of the walk bands when conditions are that way, because with 40,000 participants all crowding up on 20 and 40 meters at the same time, you can imagine it's what we call a zoo. So yeah, pretty tough. Perhaps try some of the other modes if that's really not your thing. You know, perhaps PSK, RTTY, FT8, FT4, because there's only so much you can do to manage that traffic number, I guess.
Thank you very much, Mark. I mean, if I can also come on to something else that I hear quite a lot as a chairman of a club here in Norfolk, and it's something you did touch on actually earlier on, which is why is it 5.9 for all contacts? Because there are some people who don't really like contesting, and I think one of the reasons that I've heard for them to resent it is that people say, oh, well, you can use it to check out your station, but if you're not going to get an accurate signal report back, what's the point, except that you can hear them at all? I mean, what's your personal feeling on this? I know it would take probably a little bit more time to assimilate and work out what the signal report is, but why really aren't they? Why aren't the signal reports sort of more genuine and more realistic?
Yeah, I absolutely hear you, David, and it's something that I often ask myself. And it really comes down, the real reason for it is that it slows rate. That's where it's come from. So for those entering the contest, as we've touched on, QSOs make prizes, right? So anytime that you're changing the standard exchange information, or that you don't really need to change by the rules of the contest, the obvious question is why change it, right? So if you want to increase your QSO rate, you keep it as 5 and 9. Is it the play? Is it right? Is it not right? Of course, there's going to be debate and views on that very point. But for the serious contester, at least, standardizing that signal report will make your life, easier, I suppose, and give you more QSOs at the end of the day. because you're not having to listen for reports and edit it in the logging software. It isn't really an important part of contesting, I suppose, on HF, because we all know that it's very rare that you hear something other than 5 and 9. So it's not, as I mentioned in the presentation, contesting is not a place for accurate signal reports, certainly on HF. It tends to be better sort of etiquette of signal reports on VHF and UHF, where perhaps the QSO rates are a lot lower. But yeah, it's always going to be a topic of debate. But I think really it's making the contact that is the important thing in a contest, rather than how strong you are. That's really the bottom line, I think, David.
Yeah, thank you. No, thanks for the honest answer. I was really, I suppose, looking at it from the perspective of non-contesters, and I think it's one of the things that does seem to be a bit contentious. But thank you very much for explaining that. I've got another question now over on BATC this time from Fred G3SVK, who says, "How many contests do I have to do to participate to obtain a special contest call sign?" And he also says, "Many corrupt my call, making me lose points, i.e. SUK, HVK, HVC, etc. So is the special contest call beneficial for this reason?"
I think that depends on the contest call that you select. Mine is probably not the best example, actually. The G9 prefix, the number of stations that log me is G0W on CW. And a very good evening to you, Fred, by the way. It's nice to hear you watching. We had a QSO not long ago on 40 meters. Yeah, the criteria you can, if you do a Google search for RSGB SCCs, there's an application form and it sets out very clearly what the criteria is, and it has changed. I don't believe it's that difficult to get. That you have to show a certain level of performance in a number of contests. I forget the number of contests. It's probably 4 or 6 or something like that. And you just, over a period of perhaps a few years. So you just need to set out those contests, how many QSOs you made. I think it's done on number of QSOs rather than QSO, the score. So you have to show how many QSOs you've made against the winner of that category. And providing it's at a certain level, then you'll get an SCC. So I would encourage it. I mean, sometimes, people won't know you as G9W. They don't know that's me, for instance. So that may affect it a little bit. People tuning around here, G3SVK. Oh, it's Fred. I'll give him a call. But the G9, the reason I picked G9 is because of the prefix. It's quite a rare prefix, and therefore it attracts attention for the prefix hunters. But it can be really fun to use, and of course it's a lot shorter as well. It could reduce your ability of being worked incorrectly. So I would just say perhaps be careful about the call selection, because you can choose all of the ones that are available. You can have the choice of.
All right, thank you very much, Mark. I hope that helps, Fred. Next, another question from Terence 2E0IPK. Amplifiers were just mentioned. This was a little while back now. Again, another problem for those with limited power. You can call a station as much as you like and then get trampled on by someone running 100 watts to 400 watts or even more. So have you got any suggestions or recommendations for that, Mark?
Yeah, so a number of things there. So, well, of course, there are categories, power categories for pretty much all the contests, actually. There's a QRP section, a 100-watt section, and then the high power section for the amplifier guys. So everybody running 100 watts is going to be in the same boat to that degree. And as a 2E0, of course, you're running 50 watts. So there's a slight difference there, but only really minor from 50 to 100 watts. Really, I think calling CQ with low power is really tough, especially on sideband, because all of the big signals on the band are going to be running high power. So it's really, really tough to call CQ with 100 watts sometimes, especially on a crowded CQ worldwide band, right? 10 meters is a really big band. So when 10 meters gets good, it's open up to pretty much 29 megs. You've got a lot of band to play with. So 10 meters for the 100-watt entrance is a really good band. The worst, the most difficult I would say 40 meters, because the band is really not that big. There's really, really big signals, and everyone's crammed into quite a small bandwidth. So 40 can be a real struggle. I would say that when calling CQ and running stations on a frequency becomes tough, then really the skill is adapting to that as a low power entrant and searching and pouncing and seeing how quick you can do that, going from one to the next as quickly as possible. Because you've got to be thinking that the other stations running 50 or 100 watts are probably just going to be calling CQ and getting no answers. So you're maximizing your efficiency by searching and calling guys other than calling CQ.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Mark. Andy 2E0REE now says, is it a good idea to have a listing antenna, like maybe that's a listening possibly, like a Bavrig or a full band loop?
Yeah, probably means a beverage or a loop there.
Oh, yeah,
yes,
probably, yes.
If you've got the space for a beverage, and really beverages, I suppose they can be as long or as short as you want them, but the longer the better, of course. Yes, they can be very, very useful, especially on the low bands like 160 and 80 and maybe even 40 meters. I would highly recommend that, because you can pull out signals and if you've got a high noise floor where you are as well, beverage antennas and loops can eliminate a lot of that, and it becomes very, very effective to run separate receive antennas. So yes, certainly I would encourage that. That's a really, really good point.
Okay. I've got a question for you now. Looking at the popularity of a lot of the new digital data modes like FT8 and that sort of thing, some of which have some automated functions, do you see the day maybe where you could almost do a contest with a machine, with the software running the contest for you? And if that happens, how will it be a true competitive race between people? Do you see that happening?
I mean, yeah, we see certainly with modes like FT8 and FT4 that a lot of those QSOs can be pretty automated, can't they? And it's sort of even just a clicking contest on your mouse, right? Yeah, it doesn't do a lot for me personally, if I'm honest. I prefer, the skill of being able to listen and pick calls out on sideband and CW. That's really where I think the operator skill is, and getting the accuracy there. Probably, I think there still is an efficiency performance challenge on those digital modes, even with the FT8 and FT4 contests, because there is still a skill in maximizing your QSOs in that constrained time frame on a very crowded band. But yeah, I think it's a good point. Personally, am I in favor of things like DXCC credit for automated QSOs? Not really. And the same goes for contesting for me as well. Personally, I think it has to be a test of operator skill.
Sure, surely that's got to be this at the centre of it, the spirit of it, really. But I just thought
Yeah.
I'd ask, just that so many people now I hear leaving their computers and come back an hour later and they've done 100 contacts and haven't been near it.
I mean, it's very interesting to see how your station can perform and where you're getting to, and getting a flavour for that. But if the operator's not doing anything, then it's not really worthy of a certificate, is it?
Well, I'll let everybody else make their own judgment on that as well. By the way, you mentioned about getting a special contest call sign earlier on, and my colleagues back at the RSGB have sent me a message just to say that if you want to apply, then you look at this web address, which is rsgb.org/SCC, special contest call. So that's how to find out more if that's of interest to you. And one final question for you, Mark. Now, this is from ADG6AD. Is there a circumstance when you would enter a single band entry versus all band entry in an all band contest?
Yeah, thanks, AD. Nice to hear from you. Yes, absolutely. So a number of things are coming to mind here. Propagation, of course. If you can see that propagation is going to be particularly good on a certain band, like 10 meters, for instance, you may want to focus your attention on 10. And if you've got limited space for antennas, perhaps you can put up a small Yagi antenna on 10 meters and be very competitive on that band. So, but you may not have the space for all antennas for all bands. So it helps you be competitive by targeting a specific band and doing a single band entry. And then, of course, you've got the choice of doing that single band entry. You've then got the choice of entering it higher power, low power, or QRP. Then you've got the choice of whether you're going to enter assisted or unassisted. And by that, I mean having DX cluster spots and RBN spots feeding your band map and giving you that assistance. So there are lots of ways you can make yourself more competitive by selecting the category, and a single band entry is one way of doing that. And of course, as I mentioned in the presentation, it provides you the ability to perhaps get some well-deserved rest at a certain time of the day as well. So yeah, certainly and you can see the results of those single band entries broken down by country, continent, world, all on the results pages of most contests as well.
And I actually said that was the last question, but another one just crept in, which is very relevant to what you just said. So I'm going to add that as well. This is another one from Fred G3SVK. He said, are many contesters using multiband multilog to boost their QSO rate? And is this allowed, he says?
Multiband multilog. I need to try and think about what Fred means by that. Maybe read the question again, David, to see if
sure,
I can
it's pretty much as you said, certainly. Are many contesters using multiband multilog to boost their QSO rate? And if so, I guess, is this allowed?
So maybe what Fred's referring to there is the category called multi-multi, which is where you have a station or two stations per band. Yes, I mean, providing you're operating within the rules, which is, so for the category of multi-multi, it's where you have a number of operators. There's an unlimited amount of operators with an unlimited amount of stations. And you just need to go on and make as many QSOs as you can in the contest. The only rule that you have is that you're only allowed one transmitted signal per band at any one time. So for that type of station, like K3LR that I showed earlier, you would have, if you had more than one station on one band, you'd have an interlock system whereby when one station transmits, the other one's locked out. So yes, but that would certainly boost their scores. But of course, they would be entering the multi-multi category, which means that they'll be competing against stations doing exactly the same. So it's not like the multi-multi stations will be competing against a single operator, maybe on a single band, because that they wouldn't appear in the results in the same category. So you wouldn't be competing as a single operator. You wouldn't be competing against those stations.
And I guess you might lose some time as well when you're switching between antennas and tuning and things like that as well.
Indeed.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for everything. I mean, lots of great comments and thanks from everybody. I'll leave with this thought from Werner Muller, V51JP, who says, great presentation. I love contesting. Not easy from here, but still great fun DXing from Africa, he says. So there we are. It's also something, as you mentioned earlier, that you can do from all around the world. Mark, thank you very much for showing us, all of us, especially if we don't do contesting, that there is a lot more to it and maybe some benefits for those of us who are not doing it at the moment for it to be something to consider. So once again, thank you very much, Mark, for this evening.
Thank you, David, and a very good night to everybody.
Thank you. And that concludes this webinar. And thanks once again to our guest presenter, Mark Haynes, M0DXR. Thanks also to Studio Director Tammy Palmer, M0TC, and the RSGB team who helped put this series together behind the scenes. We hope you've enjoyed this Tonight at 8 and that you'll be able to join us next time when Professor Ian Morrison, G0DMU, will share with us the fascinating story of the Jodrell Bank Radio Telescope. And if you'd like to see details of this and other future webinars or recordings of past editions, please visit rsgb.org/webinars, where you can also send us comments and feedback. And a reminder that if you subscribe to the RSGB's YouTube channel, you'll be notified of all upcoming Tonight at 8 webinars, as well as other new videos and presentations from the Society on a wide range of amateur radio topics. But that's it for this time. Until next time, this is David G7URP signing off and clear. Bye-bye.